Let's begin the March. Oh, got it. Okay. Let's begin the Wednesday, March 15th, 2023 meeting of the Landmarks Commission. Item A, that this meeting is available on Zoom, which I believe all of us know because here we are. So item B is roll call. And who did you say was present and not present?
Everyone except for Paul and Susan are excused.
They're excused.
Walter Johnson hasn't joined us yet, though.
Okay. And then item number C, approval of the agenda for tonight. Do we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Motion.
Who made the motion?
Rebecca.
Okay. And who seconded?
I did.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? Okay, tonight's agenda is approved. Approval of the minutes from the February 15th meeting. Is that correct? Yeah, February 15th, right. The Landmarks Commission. Do we have a motion to approve those?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Are there any nays to? No? Okay, then the motion to approve the February minutes is approved. Item number E, regular business, COA 23-04. Consideration with possible action on a design review for a new deck located at 625 South Quincy. Jason.
So, as usual, we have a map showing the location of 625 South Quincy and the Astor neighborhood. We'll specifically be talking about a rear deck, the removal of one and replacing it with a new one. So this house looks a lot like the one in the pictures on the left. And when I say rear deck, perhaps if you squint at that photo on the lower left, you'll see a little bit of the rear deck at the back where it should be. Two photos, top center and top right, are of the existing deck. The top right photo shows how the deck footprint extends just a little bit beyond the width of the house. That's fine. We have a sketch here filling up the bottom right portion of the screen of the new deck. The proposed new deck has the same width, parallel along the street line, but it's growing further into the backyard by about twice the size of the current deck. No problem with that. All the material will be replaced. It's largely composite material, but I'm not too worried about that because I'm calling it largely hidden from view. And as a result, staff recommends that we approve the deck. Thank you.
Would anyone like to discuss this? Seeing no discussion, do we have any motions on the floor?
I'll make a motion to approve the COA.
I'd second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and a motion to second. Is there any opposition? Okay, all those in favor say aye. 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 Anyone opposed? Okay, the motion carries to approve. That brings us to, where'd my sheet go? Here we go. COA 23-05. Consideration with possible action on a design review for a new deck located at, for a new porch, new deck, and partial window replacement located at 515 Cass Street. Jason, take it away. This is an interesting one.
It's sadly an interesting one. Yes, 515 Cass came before the Landmarks Commission. I think it was in February of last year. Question mark, verbal inflection. Yes. So at that time, the Landmarks Commission approved foundation work on the building. And at that time, we briefly discussed the front porch, but it was stated that the porch would be rebuilt identical to what was there. Here you see two photographs, the 2019 file photo on the left, and the new porch that's been built, 2023, on the right. So on the next slide, I have some zoomed in views of the two porches for comparison. I'll just kind of let that sink in for a moment. I do want to state that material-wise, it appears that the columns have been reused. Perhaps the piers in line with the columns below, also the same. But the The balusters, instead of being a slender metal, have been replaced with wood. Some newel posts have been added. The railings are now lapped across the front of the columns, and I'll talk to that in some detail here shortly. And here with these new balusters, they're face nailed to the rails. So it's a substantially different design and material than what had been here before. It should have been the subject of a COA in its own right, but it was not. Outside of the front porch, though, I do want to mention next photo. This is another recent photo. We're also discussing at least one replacement window. I think it's the window directly above the door at the driveway. We're also discussing some replacement doors, the side door at the driveway that you see here and one on the back. And there's a back deck largely hidden from view. That's also new. Some gutter work, which would normally be the subject of a staff level COA. No problem there. The main talking point today, honestly, is the front porch. So on that front porch, moving forward a slide, I know in the past I've talked about face nailed and end nailed. So here, to help further that ongoing conversation, a diagram at the left, you see it's broken up into three little pictures. The two on the left one and center one, that's an illustration of face nailing of the balusters to rails. So what's been constructed on the front porch at 515 Cass is substantially what you see in the diagram at the far left, where the balusters have been face nailed into a top rail and into a bottom rail. And then there's some sort of top cap extending all above that. Best practice for front porch, a historically appropriate design is not this. It would be more in keeping with the diagram, the third one, the far right one, where the balusters are end nailed into the top and bottom rails. With 515 Cass, we also have a new added wrinkle where the property owner has decided to introduce intermediate newel posts. So if I could just skip to the little picture at the bottom right, I'm throwing around some words. I want to make sure you all follow what I'm talking about. When I say newel, I'm talking about the shorter posts. So there's a newel post at the bottom of the stairs, and there are these intermediate newels in between the columns. So here in that little bottom right picture, I've labeled newel posts in an example of, pretty good design work. There's a column and then the balusters, those are the spindles. So when I'm looking at 515 Cass, I see that these newels that have been introduced are not in line with the columns, but rather have been bolted or attached to the face of the porch structure, which, again, is fine for a 20th century deck on the back of a house, but as a design choice, it's, in a word, it's inappropriate for a historic front porch. Also, we see with the new wooden balusters, where they used to be metal, they're now wood, and they've been face nailed to the upper and lower rail. If you look at the bottom picture is an example of where they would be end nailed to the top and bottom rails. That's the appropriate design consideration. Also, the rails themselves, I mentioned in the assessment, they have been lapped across the fronts of the columns rather than being installed in an intercostal manner between the columns. I'll get into intercostal later, but I know you like new words, so I've introduced you to intercostal if you aren't already familiar with it. So in the bottom picture on the right, you'll see the railings extend from one side of the column to the next side of a newel post, or to the side of a column or pilaster along the side of the house. In 515 Cass, the rails have just been lapped across the outside faces of the columns. I've not seen that before on a front porch. And again, in a word, it would be inappropriate for a historic front porch. So moving forward, I have some recommendations. First recommendation is approval of the window, the rear deck, the doors, and perhaps I even mentioned the gutter. None of that really has any impact on the historic integrity of the property, because all that new material is replacing relatively new material in their own right. So it's a like for like, non-historic replacing non-historic. With regard to the front porch, the as-built design is, per the Secretary of the Interior standards, a significant alteration of a feature. And I believe it could be justifiably called incompatible with the historic house and the historic district. Getting into some detail on that in part 3 of 3. I note that similar COA applications, the Landmarks Commission has directed that all the new material is to be painted. In general, unpainted wood is inappropriate. I also note that the balusters shouldn't be face mounted to upper and lower rails, but should be attached to the bottom and top ends of the balusters. The newels, again, kind of a new wrinkle we haven't run into before, they should be in line with the porch columns, not mounted to the face of the porch deck structure. And then the porch railings, as I said, I haven't really encountered this before on a front porch where they've been lapped across the fronts of the columns, but they probably shouldn't be. They should be mounted intercostally between the columns, interrupted by the columns. And late add on here, previously the porch had porch skirts, some lattice below the porch deck. That's been removed. New porch skirts would be appropriate. And I see Stephanie hovering over the next slide because she sees the boat. But intercostal, that's bread and butter in my trade of naval architecture. But then I see, looking on Google, maybe it's an odd word for people. It means something that's interrupted. So here you see the flanged floor plates. Those are single plates. And then you see the center keelson and side keelstons. Those are individual pieces that go to the front and back faces of the floor plates. They're mounted intercostally. They're not continuous, but they're made up of little pieces. So word of the day, intercostal. I apologize for having to use it, but I don't know any better. So thank you.
Well, is there a motion to open the floor for discussion? And
Actually, I'd like to ask questions of Jason first.
Okay.
Jason, comparing the picture of the most recent of the old porch 2019, I think, would you agree that that is not historic, what was there in 2019?
I agree. That is not historic in its material and probably not historic in some aspects of its design. However, the design in 2019 is more historically appropriate than the design in 2023. And there again, I refer you to the manner in which the balusters are mounted, the location of the new newel posts, and the lapped nature of the railings across the faces of the columns.
But that is not the original porch. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Does the Secretary of Interior or our ordinance address this circumstance where a non-original design is made even more non-original?
The Secretary of the Interior is very clear in speaking to replacement of features that are no longer extant. In those cases, the Secretary of the Interior calls for a new feature to be constructed that closely matches the original historic feature based on photographic evidence or some other evidence. In the absence of that evidence, they recommend something that's sympathetic to the time of the house and or district, if it's in a district. So depending on your start point perspective, you could say that the new porch approximates the existing non-historic porch, or since the porch was removed in the absence of a COA, your start point could be the house has no porch, and therefore the missing feature should be reproduced as accurately as possible to what was historically appropriate to the house. I don't know that I want to weigh in on an opinion as to what your start point is, but I do note again that the columns appear to be the same columns as what had been there previously. So some of this not so historic material continues to serve in their same capacity here.
Right, you most definitely answered my question. Thank you.
Anyone? Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask? Jason, I have a question for you. If you go back to that picture of the new front porch next to the old one, the one you were just at, and I believe it's the railing you said, or whatever it is that goes in between. Right now it's going directly across the entire face of the porch, on upper and lower. I'm sorry, that's not baluster. That's I'm sorry.
The upper and lower rails are now.
Yeah, the upper, yes, correct. Upper and lower rail, correct.
Yes.
As I looked at this when I went over there, and then, you look at all the historic homes, I mean, what you had said was absolutely correct. And then that middle post as well free stands in almost every house in the neighborhood that's historic. And I mean, I see exactly what you're saying here. And it's like, we've talked about this with other properties, and it seems to me that once again, there's enough material here to make that improvement relatively easily. Again, it's not saying go out and buy $500 worth of material. Like, the material already exists. It's here in front of our face. I just like to make that point real clear. And in the past, I know that we have also recommended that people do just that. So I just want to throw that out there for everyone.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
I'm wondering if I might be able to speak. I received an invite for this meeting because I actually work for the property management company that manages this property on behalf of the owner. And so I apologize if I'm speaking out of turn.
I'll just make a motion to open the floor to hear from interested parties.
I will second that.
Yeah.
Ron, you're muted.
Ron, you're muted.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to open the floor. All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Are there any nays? Okay, the floor is officially open.
Sorry, Rachel. It's just a procedural thing we have to do.
I understand. Yeah, I was not sure how to properly introduce myself, but in any case, so my name is Rachel Couillard. I'm the supervising broker for Roosh Management, Inc. We're the property management firm for this property, seeking basically to handle some of the exterior and interior maintenance work and place a tenant for Jason, who's the property owner. And the only reason truly for me getting involved in this meeting is just to, kind of hear where the process is as far as getting this approved, because in the communications that I've had with the city regarding just whether or not this property is received its certificate of occupancy. And so I'm hearing what you're saying about the porch. It seems to me, based on the discussion you're having, that some areas here will continue to need to be improved. And I guess I'm just trying to find out, as a result of this meeting, the city told me that I'm kind of at the mercy of the Historical Society to receive the certificate of occupancy. And I have a tenant who is lined up and really would like to move into this home, beautiful historic home. And they need to be out of their current rental by the end of this month. But we've been kind of waiting and going back and forth with the city, trying to make sure all improvements have been made. So that's my reason for attending, and also just to find out, where were those pieces missed on this porch project, and just see what I can do to help make sure that that does in fact come to fruition in whatever way that is fitting for your organization.
Well, Rachel, I just wanted to clarify a couple of terms you threw out there. We are not the Historic Society. That is an entirely separate entity.
Okay.
We're the Landmarks Commission. And
Okay.
You talked about a certificate of occupancy. That is not something that we would address. We're addressing what we've been calling a COA, Certificate of Appropriateness, which addresses the historic nature of the structure. So
Sure.
Just to make sure you're clear on who we are and some
Okay.
of those terms.
I
That make
apologize
sense?
for my ignorance. This is usually investment properties do not fall into you and I wouldn't generally interact on an investment property that places tenants. So I
Sure.
apologize for my ignorance.
So to share with you, I mean, and that's fine. We've encountered this before, so certainly not an issue. But the certificate of appropriateness is a application that goes to our group, and we assess exactly that appropriateness of what is being proposed. And what is very concerning about this situation is that the certificate of appropriateness was not applied for the porch, even though we know the people in this process had done it previously, as our staff mentioned a year ago.
Okay. This is new to me, so I apologize if I'm kind of missing some of those pieces. My job is to manage and place tenants, and in my interaction with the city, basically they told me that that I needed to come to this meeting and see what was left as far as approvals from your organization in order for the city to allow me to move a tenant into this property. So that's really what my matter of concern is. And I understand, you know, there is a process, as you're saying, a COA. And my understanding is someone from the team that had handled the renovation of this porch missed the target, obviously. So I'm happy to try to facilitate within my team and my contacts, and with Jason, the owner, to make sure that the porch as it exists is modified to meet your expectations. Obviously, that's going to be required in this situation, but I'm hoping that, you know, the improvements that have already been made and our willingness to do what's been asked, that I'll be able to place a tenant in this home.
If I could just interrupt, I've got a question for staff, for Stephanie and Jason. Is there anything that we're facing here as the Landmarks Commission that would hinder or prevent them from placing the occupants? This is an issue that we've never addressed that I'm aware of. So that's for
Nor
staff.
have I.
Yes.
Generally, the city wouldn't have directed me to you. So I'm just, hopefully that's correct.
Generally speaking, we would not hold any sort of occupancy for a COA application. In this case, though, because they did the work without the COA and there had been some other issues from our inspection division with this property owner or property management group, it was the decision to hold their certificate of occupancy until this matter was resolved. So that doesn't mean that the COA has to be issued and resolved in the next 15 days for occupancy to be done, but we have to have a plan of action. If you guys decide to move forward with any sort of changes to that structure, that's going to be listed in that COA approval. And then that will be associated with the timeline that we work on with inspection division. So the CO doesn't have to remain held. We just wanted to have this meeting to see how the Landmarks Commission how you guys wanted to decide to move forward with them before we made any timeline decisions on that certificate of occupancy.
Just to further expand on that, Stephanie, I mean, I presume, the ordinance outlines the mechanism by which we can enforce COA requirements. And so I'm personally just not a huge fan of holding that certificate of occupancy. And it sounds like that's really not the issue, but I think if the enforcement gives us the mechanism to address that issue, I don't know what this Landmarks Commission can do of anything versus that just being strictly a staff level decision. But I hope we can get that occupancy permit issued so that we don't have to disrupt that process, because I think, gosh, if we've got to deal with the COA and, the look of the railing, versus the safety of the porch, to me, those are just two different things.
Certainly. We had some issues too when the COA application came in. It was only addressing the front porch and we knew other work had been done on the home. So there were just a couple pieces of the puzzle that were missing. We were getting different types of information from different people from the company. So I think that it was a decision above my pay grade to make sure that Landmarks Commission heard this first before we made a decision on the CO.
Okay. So to your knowledge, is there any issue now that we've done this, and that was the staff directive, I get it, but now that we're here, is there any issue with getting that certificate of occupancy issued while we continue to sort out the COA?
Yes, if they're agreeable to work through whatever terms you all put on that COA, then yes, I don't think there are any other outstanding issues.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I very much agree with that approach. Let's get this occupancy forward and address the historic COA in that context. So absolutely, I agree. proceed with allowing occupancy.
I also agree with that stance, 100%. That seems appropriate to me as well.
I agree as well.
I have a question for staff as well, as long as we're all here. This is a matter, I mean, like as far as appropriateness, and you specifically highlighted these items. It seems to me that there's no reason that in a quick one-on-one meeting with the property owner or with Rachel here, that those points could be laid out and agreed upon in a relatively short period of time. And as I stated earlier, it seems to me that all the material is right there in place already, like no new materials would need to be purchased. Is that correct?
It appears to me that there's enough material there to have implemented a better design, with the possible exception of skirting material for around the base of the porch.
Yeah.
We also, so I'm not a contractor, my other half is, so I'm, again, speaking a little bit out of turn and ignorance, just trying to represent our company as best we can. But as far as the porch design is concerned, if you all wouldn't mind sharing from today the slides that were provided, I did take some notes. I'd be happy to sit down with my other half and just kind of explain. Again, we don't typically work on historical properties like this. We make a sturdy porch that is safe, that can last as long as humanly possible in these rough Wisconsin winters. I do know with the skirting situation, it's March. We've had feet of snow this month. So we're not painting porches and putting skirting on front porches in the middle of the winter time. Typically, the results would be very poor if we did. So we'd be happy to finish that project as needed. We just, if I can just have a little more direction on exactly what you're looking for, and if you could provide those slides, perhaps we could have a brief meeting directly with someone at your organization about that and just get these items finished up. To my eyes, it doesn't seem like a huge amount of work is left to do there.
Well, I'm pleased with your obvious sincerity, and I think we can resolve this very effectively. Having said that, I would like to make a motion, but I realize we need to close the floor. So I'm going to make a motion to close the floor.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to close the floor in a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone who wants to keep it open? Okay, the floor is closed officially. Thank you.
I would like to make a motion here, Ron.
Yes.
Two parts. Number one, that the Landmarks Commission recommend that whatever departments are involved proceed with permitting occupancy of this location. And that secondly, staff works with the applicant to create a COA for the future that addresses all the details that Jason pointed out that Rachel is requesting. So bottom line is, one, proceed with any occupancy issues, and secondly, a new COA to address the issues.
David, can I challenge you on the first one of those?
Sure, go right ahead.
Occupancy. I think the way you phrased it indicates that this commission would be providing the approval. I think what we want to say is that if it's appropriate for the appropriate body to approve it, that we have no objection based on the Landmarks Commission. That we are not the ones approving it, but we have no objection to them doing it if those things that they need are in place.
I find that entirely acceptable. Happy to modify my first part as Ian just suggested.
Yeah, that sounded very good, Ian. Thank you for that input.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to rephrase this here. So we have a motion on the floor not to oppose any occupancy approval. Is that good enough? From whichever agencies actually grant that?
It would be the Green Bay City Inspector's Office that would approve that.
Okay. And then David, what was the second half of your motion again? Put this back into play.
The second half, up until Ian's going to add to it, is that applicant work with staff to generate a COA that would address the issues that Jason outlined.
In other words, to make the appropriate corrections.
Exactly.
Okay. Would anyone like to second that? Would we like staff to read that back to us now? First.
I love that you think I wrote that down. So I just want to clarify a little bit further. So in that motion, there is no approval or denial in one of those things or holding it. So I think that it needs to be approval of the COA with the and then condition it with anything that you want us to take care of, because there was they didn't go one way or the other. So just to be clear on that.
That's a reasonable modification. I'm fine with that.
So there were 3 points that Jason brought up: the back porch, deck area, the door, and the front porch. I think the recommendation was by Jason to approve the back 2 and have discussion around an appropriate solution for the front. If that's what the motion is, I concur with that.
Would anyone like to second that motion?
I think the guy who says he concurs with it.
Oh, okay. I got you. Yeah. So that is a second. Okay. Having gone through that whole thing, do we want to vote on this? Do we have a motion to approve that whole set of circumstances? What else to say it?
I'd make a motion.
Okay. And we have a motion on the floor to approve it. We have a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, having a motion and a second, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? Okay, are there any nays? Are there any objections to this motion? Hearing none, motion is approved. Interesting. Okay.
So I'll be in touch, Rachel. We'll set something up when I send you a follow-up email, okay?
Sounds good.
Okay.
She was speaking to me. I just wanted to thank you all for your time. I do appreciate you lending me your ear, and I will be looking forward to that certificate of occupancy. I will have some very, very, very happy folks looking forward to moving in there on April 1st and appreciating this lovely home. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel.
I'll excuse myself. Goodbye.
Item number F, informational public meeting on completed phases 5 through 7 intensive survey update.
So we've done a few of these before. As always, we have Rowan from Legacy Architecture and Jason Tisch from SHPO office to give some information on the results of our phases 5 through partial 7 survey update. For this round, this is where we invited property owners who had potentially eligible sites to come join us at the meeting and ask any questions that they have. So we'll kick it off with a little bit of a presentation from Rowan and Jason, and then we can open it up for discussion.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Rowan Davidson. I'm with Legacy Architecture. We are responsible for completing the recent phases of the intensive survey in Green Bay. Stephanie, do you mind if I share my screen?
Please do.
Okay. One second. Sorry about that. As the commission has already heard this presentation or some version of it a couple times in the past, I'll try to keep this fairly succinct. Generally, the purpose of a survey is to identify structures, districts, and buildings, and all kinds of other objects based on their integrity and historical significance so that they may be potentially eligible for a nomination to the National Register of Historic Places. Another purpose of a survey is to generally increase public awareness of the history and architecture of the city of Green Bay. Surveys are conducted in a sequence. First, the reconnaissance survey, which means going up and down every single street in the city with a camera and a laptop and pieces of paper and recording what the people reviewing the survey see. Most of this is based on, as I mentioned already, integrity. Then that's followed up by research, historical research using various sources, around the city of Green Bay and the Wisconsin Historical Society and the government, and then evaluating said significant resources with in conjunction with the State Historic Preservation Officer. And then the survey is written, broken down into the thematic groupings. Various properties, in the case of this survey, almost entirely buildings, are judged and evaluated based on a number of different categories. There's four main ones. The first one is whether or not a property is associated with a significant historic event, which essentially means the history of the place. The second is whether or not a property is associated with significant persons, basically the history of a specific person's life related to a certain property. And C, by far the most common, is a property which embodies the distinctive characteristic of a type, period, or method of construction, i.e. its architecture. Category D is property which yields important historical information. This is broad and generally refers to archaeological sites. This specific intensive survey, phases of 5, 6, and a little bit of 7 in the city of Green Bay, was broken in and down into the following chapters. As you can see, they're based on sort of broad categories, whether it be architecture, which is usually the largest of the chapters, or something commercial properties, religious properties, educational properties like schools, and so on. In this most recent survey, completed a few months ago, it covered the southwest side and the northeast sides of the city. It included a total of 444 resources of architectural and historic interest. 103 of these previous properties, in addition to this 444, that no longer possessed integrity, which means we did keep a record of them, but they were not included in the survey as possible subjects of research. Out of all of this, 6 individual resources were determined potentially eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places, and additionally, 1 large church complex and 2 large historic districts. I'm just going to quickly go through the examples which were identified. This first one is the Stella Anderson House along 10th Avenue. It's a bungalow. Bungalows are fairly common in Wisconsin, and in fact, in the entire country. However, Green Bay doesn't have many with a high degree of integrity. This is one of the best examples by far in the city. Another individually eligible property is the Tank Public School, not terribly far away, on South Oakland Avenue, and completed in 1939. It's an Art Deco designed school built with PWA funds during the later periods of the New Deal, and was designed by the local architect Harry Williams, who designed many of the schools in Green Bay during the 1920s and 30s. This is the Oscar and Beulah Schwein House, located along 9th Street. It's a Lustron house, finished in 1949. Almost all Lustron houses, well, no, in fact, all Lustron houses were finished between 1949 and 1951. They are enameled steel construction on the exterior and interior. They came on the backs of trucks and were erected in a matter of days on site. There aren't that many in Green Bay. There's 4 that have been identified altogether so far. There may be 1 or 2 more. And this is the one with the highest degree of integrity in the city. This is the Bart Starr House. For Green Bay residents, I'm going to assume you know who Bart Starr was. He was a quarterback of the Green Bay Packers during the 1960s and very early 70s, at a time when the Green Bay Packers and the NFL in general was quite ascendant and successful. It's located on Chateau Drive on the west side of the city. It was completed in 1960, and it's a fairly humble brick ranch house. The Starr family lived here from 1960 to 1968, covering the majority of his successful career, and thus it is likely eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places for its association with Starr's career and life. This is the University State Bank. Many of you probably recognize this as well. It's on University Avenue. It was finished in 1968. And a common term for this style of modern architecture is brutalist. It is reinforced concrete, and the concrete is intentionally left bare and etched in many cases. It was designed by Heinz Brummel, a fairly notable local modern architect during the 1950s through 70s in Green Bay, and is probably one of his better works. On the opposite side of town is the American National Bank of Green Bay, another modern bank, also concrete, brick, and steel, completed in 1974, a few years after the other bank I mentioned. This one was designed by Appleton architect James Zwack. It is individually eligible for its architecture. Some larger sites which are potentially eligible for the National Register include the St. Agnes Catholic Church complex, which includes 4 buildings and a handful of small garages. They were constructed between 1954 and 1973, and nearly all of them have some version of contemporary or modern architecture displayed. A very large district, by far the largest in the city of Green Bay. However, most of it is actually just landscape. This is the Bay Beach Wildlife Sanctuary Historic District. It's being declared potentially eligible for its landscape, for the various estuaries and dredged parts of the landscape there. It covers over 300 acres. None of the actual buildings that exist there now would be contributing to this possible district. It was originally developed using WPAA funds for a waterfowl sanctuary and park, public park for the city of Green Bay. The initial dredging and designating of the land was done between 1936 and 1941. And last but not least is the Green Bay Housing Authority Demountable Units Historic District. It's 18 houses, all of them sort of a minimal traditional style, built during 2 years, 1946 and 1947. So you can see one example there in the photo below. All of them were completed by the Green Bay Housing Authority, which was established for just this purpose, to use federal funds to move 100 houses from Indiana, which were prefabricated, and re-erect them in the city of Green Bay. Most of them were completed in this neighborhood on the southwest side of the city. And there's a concentration on a block and a half, which still maintains some integrity to that period of construction. As you may have noticed, this set of phases of the survey has yielded less in terms of the total number of resources reviewed that were included in the first place, and the number of properties which are eligible. This isn't terribly surprising, as most of the areas of the city which were included in this survey were developed during the mid-century and post-World War II eras as the city grew. Most of them were houses, and most of them were builders' houses, minimal traditionals, ranches, and so on. It's not to say those aren't necessarily historically valuable. They are, and we've identified quite a few of them here. But that they're commonplace buildings. And probably as the remainder of the surveys are done, finishing the rest of the city, the return of especially individually eligible properties will become less and less and less, for the same reason as time moves forward closer to the 50-year mark of the early 1970s. Recommendations are essentially just to complete the process, and hopefully once this is done, to possibly nominate some of the districts and individually eligible properties in the city. That is all I have. Any questions or comments?
Jason, do you have anything to add from the SHPO side of things before we open it up for public?
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. I just want to make a few bigger points. I just want to remind folks that this project and projects like this around the state are funded through our office by grants to certified local governments. The city of Green Bay is a certified local government, which is why they were able to use these grants. There may be another phase of this survey in the future to finish off the bulk of the city. And I just wanted to make the point that these survey reports are very interesting and have some interesting findings, and it's fun to look at the research and what they turn up. But I like to point out that they're also planning documents, and that they are kind of a step in a process of identifying historic properties. But then, and I like that Rowan put some of these recommendations in here in his list: apply for CLG grants, locally landmark, pursue National Register nominations. So as you digest what is in the survey report, consider the economic development potential of then nominating some of these properties or all of these properties and districts to the National Register, and making tax credit financing available for those properties. So think of it as a planning document as well. I guess those are the points that I wanted to make. Thanks to the city for coordinating these surveys, and for Rowan and Legacy for doing them.
Well, thank you, Rowan and Jason. It's fascinating to look at the stuff. I mean, it's really interesting that stuff now is history.
Some people have a hard time swallowing that pill. I mean,
that's a tough pill to swallow. Yeah,
the idea that the house that you grew up in is historically important is
no kidding. But thank you very much, gentlemen. That's very well done.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anyone else have anything they'd like to add to that, or any questions or comments? Okay, well, having heard none, any staff level COA applications?
We did not have any, right?
Right.
Okay.
No.
We did not have any.
Okay. Any staff updates?
Yes. Many thanks to Jason Tisch at SHPO. We've received news that we've been awarded a $25,000 grant to continue with the remainder of phase 7 of the intensive level survey work.
Beautiful.
So that brings our total to well over $100,000 over the last several years. Procedurally, I suppose we take that to Finance Committee now, though. Yes.
Yep.
Like we always should have.
Yes.
All right. So that's good news.
Awesome.
Do we have any other good news?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. So thank you.
But does anyone have anything else they'd like to add here? We'll call it item 3B. Anything they'd like to throw out to the group or anything before we announce the date of the next meeting, being Wednesday, April 19th, 2023. Okay, with that, we have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion. 48 minutes, by the way.
Beautiful. Hey, good stuff today. Really, really nice stuff today. Very nice. Do we have a second to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye or bye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, folks, we'll see you all at the next meeting.
All right, thanks.